So let me just ask you this about you had a piece that went a little bit viral in terms of Louis C.K.
Yeah.
and I wouldn't say I'm a close friend, but I'm a friend of Louis. I see him maybe once or twice a year, and I'm curious at your perspective on this. Like the other day, Sarah Silverman came out, I guess, arguably in his defense on the Howard Stern show and said that he had consensually masturbated in front of her multiple times. Any more recent thoughts?
Well, I mean, most of what I thought about Louis and that situation is in the clip. You know, people can find that on YouTube. I did a set at the Cellar, and I actually did that set.
And I should tell people who aren't aware, the Cellar is where Louis has now done, I guess, 2 spots that he dropped in and did. He didn't address his situation, but he basically just tried out new material.
Yeah. So he returned to the Cellar, and then there was an article in the New York Times saying that he was back on a Tuesday, I believe, and I was at the Cellar that night, that Tuesday that the Times article came out, and I was just coincidentally happened to be there that whole week. So it was kind of on my mind, on a lot of comics' mind. It was in the news a lot that he had returned after 9 months of being away, and kind of just did a drop-in and went on stage. So yeah, I spoke about it on stage, and like I said, the set kind of covers how I feel about it. The main thing that I thought was that it wasn't being given the gravity that it deserved to kind of just show up to work unannounced and just do a drop-in. I felt as though, when the last thing he said was, "I'm going to go away and I'm going to listen and I'm going to reflect on this," however he phrased it, and then to kind of just show up and bump other comedians, and also I just felt as though like the Cellar,
casual. I mean, the idea of it being casual when you come back,
nothing's changed. Yeah,
right.
That nothing's changed. I can still just show up unannounced and like dictate the terms of my return. Like there's to me, I found it curious that there's no discussion on the part of the club. The club just has the same policy. Like, whenever you want, you could have come back the day after, or you could have come back the week after. I certainly wasn't alone. Maybe I was alone in voicing it on stage or publicly, but in my conversations with comedians, there was a lot of kind of concern about him coming back like that. And also the club received a lot of heat for it. The problem that I had too was that the people that were receiving heat were essentially everyone but Louis, because he kind of just dropped in, dropped out, and then everyone else was left to kind of speak for him.
That's the weird part. I mean, we should probably explain this a little bit, because I think some of like the gaffes, like, it is traditional at comedy clubs that people of Louis' stature, and not even, I mean, Louis had, it's a fairly unique, in the stratosphere. I mean, there's, maybe a half a dozen comedians who are, in his sort of level. And there's, and even and comedians who are, sort of like the next level below can stop in a comedy club at any time and basically get up in the next slot. Unless it's like a serious, unless like the headliner's on, right? Like during the weekday, it's a free for all. And, that happens all the time. You get, and
the celebrity drop-in is kind of a standard. In fact, that's a big part of the Comedy Cellar's allure and their reputation, is that you never know who's going to stop in at any moment.
And people literally never know. Like it literally is. It would have been, pre his controversy, he could show up at any time, and people would be like psyched that he's there.
Of course.
And so the comedy club, nobody at the comedy club, there had been no policy. Nobody anticipated that he wouldn't have had a more official return. And I think that is like the part that I think people are just not aware of. They're debating whether or not it's fair for him to stay away or this and that. But it's also sort of like the mechanism, like, because there's a lot of people I would imagine at the door who are like, what are we supposed to do? Like,
that's exactly right. Yeah. I think it put a lot of people in kind of a difficult position where they had to make snap judgments. It really shouldn't be on the comedian who's emceeing that night, or even the person who's managing the club that night. I think, in
some way it's tough to put it on the owner.
Up.
It's even tough to put it on the owner in some way because of the nature of these of that relationship.
Well, I don't know that it is that tough. I mean, it's part of owning a business, and it's part of, you have to make a lot of decisions, right? So, so I think, I'm friends with Noam, and I voiced my concerns to him both in person and through email. And again, to his credit, I go on the stage at the Cellar and I say whatever I want, which is again why, I think part of what made that clip, the dynamic of what made the clip interesting was that I was saying it on stage at the Cellar. But I don't think you can paint it with one brush. And also, the thing that I was saying in the clip is, it was more of a macro discussion about the Me Too movement, about misogyny, patriarchy, powerful men acting without consequence. I talked about Cosby, I talked about Trump, and I talked about Louis because, unfortunately, he made himself part of that macro discussion.
Right. Well, folks can go to tedalexandro.com and you can pay what you want, right? Is that what you're doing with the senior class?
No, not with this one. This one, my last two specials are pay what you want. They're on my website. This one I released through All Things Comedy, which is Bill Burr and Al Madrigal's company, a comedian-owned company. And to this point, they've been a podcast network. They have Bill Burr's podcast and I think for like 50 others. But this is the first special that they're distributing, and this is kind of their first foray into that terrain. So, you can get it at atcspecials.com, and there's an option to buy it. There's an option to stream it, but it's on atcspecials.com.